Well, as you may have seen, an Irish priest has angered his church hierarchy by marrying divorced couples. Now, that controversial clergyman, Father Buckley, has actually ignored warnings that he doesn't have the church authority to perform the wedding. He's in our Belfast studio, and in London we're joined by our religious editor, Roanne Pascoe. Well, good morning to both of you. Father Buckley, if we can start with you, I'm correct in saying, aren't I, that in 1987, Bishop Daly wrote to you, forbidding you to perform this marriage ceremony. Is that correct?
He did. He had already dismissed me as a priest of the diocese a year previously in 1986 for my liberal views about various things to do with the church here in Northern Ireland.
So is the position, we must get this clear to start with, is the position that you are staying in situ despite the fact that you have no authority within that church?
Well, I had been in the church both as a student and as a priest for 17 years. So I felt at that stage that it wasn't proper for the church to put me out on the side of the street. So I have stayed in the presbytery in Larne where I was living, and I'm operating an independent ministry.
Now, you're continuing to perform the marriage ceremonies with divorced couples. That's correct, isn't it?
That's true, yes.
Now, the marriages are, you have been told that these are not marriages in the sight of God. So really, aren't we saying really that you, through your own convictions, believe it's right to perform the ceremonies, but why are you staying within the Catholic creed to do that?
The bishop hasn't said that the marriages are not valid in the eyes of God. He has said that they're not valid in the eyes of God as far as the Catholic Church is concerned. And I think that's a very important qualification. I am convinced that the marriages are valid in the eyes of God, and also because we observe all the requirements of the civil law in the United Kingdom, the marriages are 100% and absolutely legal.
To put it in very different terms then, if you don't like the rules of the club, and this is one of the major rules of the club, why don't you leave the club?
Well, the church is not a club, it's a community, and there are no chiefs and no Indians. We're all supposed to be fellow members of a church, and Christ is the head. And in doing what I'm doing, I am sincerely following my conscience, and so are the couples who come to me. Another important point that I would like to mention to you is that for the first more than half of the Catholic Church's life, it allowed divorced couples to remarry. And there are still parts of the Catholic Church where divorced people can remarry. And of course, it's quite a common practice in the Protestant churches. So what I'm doing is in line with Scripture, in line with Christian tradition, and also I think fits in with the compassion of the Christ of the Gospel.
But you believe that the current tenets of the Catholic Church, tenets that they hold dear, of course, are out of date?
Well, the church changes from time to time and place to place. And Mike, I suppose I could put it in a nutshell for you by saying that I am doing for ordinary poor people what the Vatican and the hierarchy do for the wealthy and for royalty.
Father Buckley, we'll come back to you in just a moment, if we may. As we said, we're joined by Roanne Pascoe, a religious editor. Father Buckley's in a strange position here, isn't he? It's almost an old-style rebellion. I know he wouldn't like me using that word, but it's a very... One read of these things, what, 400 years ago, these things happening. Where does he stand now in the eyes of the Church?
Well, it's not so much where he stands in the eyes of the Church. I mean, you think he explained it very well. The bishop in the diocese where he works has forbidden him expressly not to do this. Now, a Catholic priest has to be obedient to his bishop. The Church may not be a club, and there may not be Indians and other things that he's talking about, but actually it does have quite a strict organisation, and it does have rules and regulations, and they are, well, they're imposed by the authorities. There is a pope and there are bishops who actually have authority in the Church. The priest is supposed to actually follow their guidance.
It's the most crucial debate of all, in a sense, with the Catholic Church, isn't it? The continual monitoring of whether the Church is in line with society. And maybe Father Buckley is right. Maybe the Church is not, in some senses, in line with current thinking.
Well, it seems to me that he's not right in misleading, what appears to me to be misleading people in his parish to think they are getting married in the eyes of the Church, because they simply are not. The Church does not accept these marriages. And what's dangerous about this is that these people who, you know, the couples, and many couples who are going to him to get married, are actually not married in the eyes of the Church. Now, they're legally married, of course, because he's legally able to do that.
In fairness, I think he said in the eyes of God they're married, which is maybe...
Well, I mean,
Let's come back to Father Buckley. Father Buckley, if it emerged that what you were doing was unpopular and created hostility within the community, would you stop?
No, I've never actually. I always follow my conscience, and I don't wish to be popular and don't do things to be popular. I wonder, could I just comment on one or two things that Roanne has said? and I'm very pleased to meet her today. This whole thing of obedience is actually maybe a little bit too simple, because one of the teachings of the Catholic Church, which we all learn in our catechism, is that we are bound to be obedient to our lawful superiors. But if our conscience tells us to do something different, then conscience has to be the bottom line. The other interesting thing is what I'm doing in Northern Ireland at the present time is being done throughout the world in the Catholic Church by bishops and priests. And I've actually had the experience of having couples sent to me by a lot of priests and even by one bishop in the Irish Republic. This problem of the divorced and remarriage is a very big one. In the Irish Republic at the present time, they are forbidden to have the civil liberty of divorce. And there are 80,000 people living in second unions who are living in limbo, and they're being forced into this situation